Okay, hi everybody. My name is Evan Mulch. I'm the field coordinator for the John Birch Society in South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, and I have with me Mr. McManus. He's the president emeritus of the John Birch Society. And without further ado, Mr. McManus, how are you doing?
Doing fine. I've done
Okay.
several of these programs with people all over the country. I was on one of these yesterday in state of Washington, up in Spokane area.
Good.
Very, very successful, getting to know some of the new coordinators that we've hired recently.
Yeah, we're doing very well. Tell everybody a little bit about your background. You graduated from, you were born in Brooklyn, New York. You attended Catholic school, it looks like, and attended Holy Cross College, graduated from Holy Cross in 1957, and let's see here. You married Mary O'Reilly, and you raised 4 children together. And in 1960, you departed the USMC honorably as an active duty officer, and then you accepted a position as an electronics engineer with a Massachusetts company. And just talk about how you got started in the John Birch Society.
I got started in the John Birch Society because I was being victimized, as most Americans were, by the fact that a new organization had arisen in our country, and it was dangerous and it had to be watched and so on and so on. So I decided to do some of the watching. And I eventually went to a meeting and expecting to find screwballs and dangerous people and so on. Didn't find that. I found good, solid Americans, and listened to a program that they had about the society, and then bought a couple of books and went home and started looking at it. At the time, I was a fan of William Buckley. I eventually found out that William Buckley was a traitor. I wrote a book about him called The Pied Piper of the Establishment, which he was for many years. And the more I read, the more I understood. I got upset about this and that, and I finally joined the Birch Society in 1964. They asked me to become a field coordinator, very much like what you do, Evan. In 1966, I had a territory that included 5 New England states. And then in 1968, they asked me to give that up and come into the home office and take a desk job where I would help with the ad hoc committees and the Speakers Bureau, which was very, very popular at the time. And that was, well, in 1963, Robert Welch appointed me the Director of Public Relations. I did that for many, many years. And then 1991, I was named President of the Society. In 2000, I became President Emeritus, and I've served in that position for the last 5 years.
Okay.
Glad to be back in the front row of the fray via these Zoom meetings. You call them webinars, that's a good word for it. And I found it to be very productive, very helpful. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, questions. If anybody has a question, put it in the chat section, but we're going to talk about Anarchy USA. This is the name of a film we had in the 1960s, and we were watching part of it before this started. How popular did this film become in the 1960s?
Became very popular because there were cities burning down, and there was rioting in the streets. There was all kinds of upset and so forth, and people wanted to know what was happening, why. Anarchy USA showed them. It's a film produced by the John Birch Society, mostly the work of a man named Ed Griffin, and it became very, very effective. In the film, you'll meet Julia Brown, a courageous American Black lady who served as undercover operative for the FBI in the communist movement in Cleveland for almost 10 years. You'll meet Leonard Patterson, a man who became a convinced communist in the 30s and had so much ability and so forth that the communists took him to Russia for 2 solid years to train him so he could come back and help to communize America. He eventually saw through it all and ended up as a cab driver in New York City when we found him and asked him if he'd like to help in putting down the communist revolution. He said, sure. What can I do? He said, well, go on a speaking tour. He said, well, somebody help me write a speech and I'll be happy to do it. So he did. And he was quite a character. He's in the film. Another black man and so on. So Anarchy USA is a marvelous film, and it's appropriate today because of what is happening with Antifa and the Black Lives Matter movement and so on. I ran into somebody recently who said something about Black Lives Matter, how important that was. I said, well, don't all lives matter? And they got mad at me. That, you're not supposed to do that. I said, well, I know that there are a lot of American Negroes, blacks, who are anxious for equality. Right? They want equality, and I want it for them. I think that's correct. I like that idea, but I don't see that there's anything to be gained by just saying that Black lives matter. All lives matter, and especially do the lives of infants in the womb matter. Most of the infants in the womb being killed in our country are the product of blacks. Black women, black men, and so forth. Maybe some not black men, but I think it's 46% of all of the abortions in our country are black, and the blacks should be up in arms about that. And I'm glad to see that some of them are.
Well, I have a book in front of me. It's called I Testify by Julia Brown, and on the back she says, let's see here. Among the other sickening subjects, we, the communists, and this is when she was part of the communist network, they were taught that we must incite Negroes to demand of the federal government that several states be given over exclusively to Negroes. So this is what's going on at that time.
I got a couple of booklets. I don't know whether I showed these to you before. Here's a booklet put out by the communists. It's called American Negro Problems, written by a man named John Pepper, whose real name was Joseph Pogany. He was a Hungarian entrant into our country from Hungary, as I said. He was a dedicated communist. The book is very obvious. This was distributed among the blacks in America by communists and anybody that they could get to help them. The book was actually published in 1928. And then there's another one called The Negroes in a Soviet America. This was written by two communists named Ford and Allen. And it goes on in 47 pages to talk about how we're going to go about doing this. We're going to create a ruckus, and we're going to have interventions. We're going to have the federal government involved, and then we're going to get federal legislation and so on, move towards making America a communist nation. It's a very interesting line at the bottom page of the last page of this book. It's 47 pages long. And it ends up saying to the blacks that they gave the book to, join the Communist Party, help create the powerful great vanguard which is leading the masses towards socialism. Not towards communism, but towards socialism. That's the ultimate goal. And that's, of course, what's been happening in our country for a long, long time. The USSR stood for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, right? And I've always said, not always, but over the past many years, I've said that socialism is more dangerous than communism. And somebody would look at me and say, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, if you have communists seize control of your country, they haven't destroyed the resistance, and they have to form a KGB or a NKVD in order to control people. But if you have socialism take over your country, it's because you voted yourself into the condition and you've destroyed resistance in the process. Socialism is what they're really after. And
so we should practice.
We're getting
so we should practice socialist distancing, not social distancing.
That's right. Social distancing is quite different than socialist takeover, right?
Yeah.
Well,
So
these
the,
two booklets were reprinted by the John Birch Society and were spread all over the country, and they helped to get Americans, especially Americans in the southeast part of our country, down where you are, to understand what this agitation was all about, all of the marches and the parades and the violence that came. And of course, they, everybody was told, and Julia Brown's very, very explicit about this. She was told while she was in the communist movement to look for Martin Luther King for leadership. And Martin Luther King is supposed to be the, without question, the leader of the nonviolent movement in our country, which is a lie. It's a perfect lie. On April 3rd of 1965, an issue of the magazine called the Saturday Review published an article about Martin Luther King, and they quoted him as saying there were 4 steps in the program that he was leading. The first step was demonstrators go into the streets to exercise rights. And the second step was racists resist by unleashing violence against them. Third step, Americans in conscience, in the name of decency, demand federal intervention. And the fourth step was the administration, under mass pressure, initiates measures of immediate intervention and remedial legislation. That's socialism. Right? So Martin Luther King's program called for violence. He wanted it to happen. Now, later on, Julia Brown joined the Speakers Bureau of the John Birch Society, and she put an end to a lot of that going on in the southern part of our country. She toured all through Georgia, your state, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. She focused there, but she went around the country as well, telling everybody what was going on, helping them to understand that they should take a look at the film Anarchy USA that you recommend, and certainly I do myself recommend it, and so on. So Martin Luther King was a fraud right from the beginning. He was a plagiarizer who got his degree at Boston University through plagiarism. He was a liar. He once said there are as many communists in the civil rights movement as there are Eskimos in Florida. And of course, there were no Eskimos in Florida, but there were plenty of communists in Florida and all throughout, especially in the Southeast. And she did an awful lot. We can go on more about her. And
yeah, can you talk about one of her trips, into the South? Because you would join her. Were there, did people welcome her with open arms when she came to the South, or what was that like?
Well, what happened frequently is that King and his allies, his entourage, would go into a community, seek out some Black leaders and say, we're going to come down here, we're going to start a demonstration, we're going to start a parade and so forth, and so on. So it got to a point where the people who were being solicited to start the riot, start the demonstrations and so forth, had figured out that the thing to do was to call the John Birch Society and get Julia Brown to come to their community and speak to a meeting of Blacks and whites. And she did that over and over again. And I participated in one of those meetings with her in Sandersville, Georgia. And it was extremely successful. They stopped the King right in his tracks. She became so potent that when the King forces realized that Julia Brown was coming to town before they got their riot started, they canceled their program.
Wow.
And what happened is that King became worth more to the movement to communize America as a dead man than a live man. Yeah. And so he became dead.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize is that the momentum had gone down already. Martin Luther King was no longer, gaining the crowds that he used to gain because Americans had become awake to, they'd awoken to what was going on, sort of like what's going on now. You know, the riots have kind of died down because Americans have done some research and they see what
Well,
the riots are really about. Yeah.
what has happened is Birch Society members have gone into some of those situations and told them about what Antifa is all about, told them about the Black Lives Movement is all about. The Black Lives Movement is a repeat of exactly what happened in the 60s, and it thrives on violence and destruction, burning and even killing in occasion. And it's got to be stopped. I think Americans are tired of hearing about it, and Americans in the Birch Society have been very successful in getting some of these people to understand that this is not the way to go. This is not the American way, and it's going to end up ruining our country if we let it continue.
So what are the solutions? Do we just, you know, share the video, or is there more to it than that? Set up committees? Go ahead.
Well, what's needed is for information to be distributed. The society lives on education is our strategy and truth is our only weapon. And that has never changed. So we can bring about change through spreading information, getting people to understand. A good way of doing that would be to have showings of the Anarchy USA film. I'm delighted to know that it's available on YouTube. You can explain to anybody how to get that, Evan.
Yeah, it's on the John Birch Society YouTube page. You just go to our YouTube page and click at the search box and type in Anarchy USA, and I will actually play this at the end of this event. So if you want to stick around afterwards, you can watch the entire film by continuing to watch on your computer.
I'd like to tell a story about something that happened. Martin Luther King got his doctoral degree from Boston University, and he got it through plagiarism and so forth. He was a dishonest man even back then. But one point during the height of the disruptions going on in the late 60s, we at the Birch Society headquarters got a call from Boston University Divinity School asking if somebody would bring down a copy of the Anarchy USA film that they'd heard about so that they could play it before the students in the school of the Divinity School at Boston University. Well, I got to be the guy to do that. I brought the film down. They had a projector. I got it all set up and I said, I'm ready to go. And I said, fine. There were about 30 or 40 students there. And their intention was to see the film and to know how ridiculous it was. They could laugh about it. They could disavow it, of course. And they would say, that John Birch Society is really as bad as we've been told they're bad. Well, that didn't work. After the film was over, I asked if there were any questions, and the guy who was running the meeting, the professor, came running over to me and he said, Mr. McManus, please bundle up your equipment and leave. We have other things we have to do. They didn't want me to stay. They didn't want me to answer questions. They didn't want me to expound further on the subject than had been expounded in the. So I went back to our Belmont, Massachusetts headquarters, which was only a 10-minute ride away, and I told everybody about what had happened and how we had won again. Right? We can win again if we do the job. Sometimes people come to me and they say, "What is it that we need in the John Birch Society?" And I say, well, we need the films, we need the books, we need the magazines, we need this. But mostly what we need is visibility. We need people out there letting others know that there's John Birch Society's there and they have the answers to this. They have the information that's needed to put down the insurrections and so on. One of your fellow coordinators up in New Jersey is very successful at doing this. He's got the members in New Jersey going to street fairs and county fairs and parades and so forth, 60, 70 of them every year. And this year he wasn't able to do it because of social distancing and so on. But He's had people come to him after the members have set up a booth at a street fair or a county fair or something like that. People come up to him and say, you know, I first saw you here at the fair 2 years ago. I bought some material. I thought about it. I did some examinations and so forth. And you people are right. I want to join the John Birch Society. How do I do it?
Mm-hmm.
And visibility is what is needed, right? Visibility in any way you can get it honestly. We used to put up a lot of billboards. Billboards are very expensive, so members are a little skittish about doing that. But there are other ways of making the society's visibility better known.
We put up a billboard in Spokane, Washington yesterday. So it's in various places around Spokane. And we've just gotten a billboard company in South Carolina and Georgia to agree to post our information on their billboards.
Very good.
So it's gonna, you know, people are waking up. For a while, business people have been scared to say that they're John Birch Society members. You know, they're making a lot of money. They didn't, you know, some of them don't think there's a lot to risk. But right now, a lot of them are losing their businesses. So they see that there's not much to risk at this point by speaking up.
I have had people tell me that if I join the John Birch Society, I'll lose my business. And that was not so. They wouldn't have lost their business. They would have been respected in the community.
Right.
So they stayed outside the Birch Society, and now they're losing their business because of what is happening. Right.
It's too bad.
Unfortunately, it was predictable.
Yeah.
And it's going to be worse if we don't stop it and do what the Birch Society was created to do. What we need in the John Birch Society is people out in the community saying, look, here's what you need to know about what's really happening. Go ahead, you got something that you wanted to share.
Yeah, this is one of our magazines we started handing out a few years ago when I first started as a field coordinator. And we went to police events and handed this out. This was called Police Under Fire. We used this one too. We bought this in bulk about Antifa.
Antifa, right.
And if you set up a booth at a place and you start handing these out to people, you know, sell everything for $1 maybe. You just ask for a donation, whatever people are willing to give. And this is an Antifa handbook. This is a great way to gain visibility. We had members who put this into a newspaper, and this was an insert in 20,000 newspaper copies that were sent out all over Northeast Georgia. And you can see the whole entire thing is a support your local police advertisement, basically, for the John Birch Society.
And of course, the revolutionaries want to defund the police, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And these support your local police bumper stickers are very helpful too. They get a lot of visibility for anybody who, you know, wants to do something special.
Years ago, I was driving home late at night and at a higher rate of speed than I should have been on the highway. And I was stopped by a state trooper, and he came up and he said to me, "I like your bumper sticker." I said, "I was going to give you a ticket. Instead, I'll give you a warning. Slow down." And so the bumper stickers saved me having to pay a fine for speeding.
Well, I can see, I've been honked at by a police officer, and I thought, what in the world am I doing wrong here? I thought, surely he's going to pull me over. And he drives past me and he waves at me. And I'm thinking to myself, what did I do? What did I do?
They give you a thumbs up, right?
Yeah.
Too. Thumbs up, right?
Yeah. I'm going to show everybody an SYLP committee formation report. So give me just a second here. Give me a second to share it. I've got it right here. So if you do want to start a support your local police committee in your community, this is how you do it. Now, if you're a member, we have to have a member as the chairman of the committee, but the 7 other members of the committee can be anybody. Of course, the chairman and vice chairman and the secretary / treasurer, unless there's a separate secretary and a separate treasurer. But the 3 or 4 people that lead the committee have to be approved by the John Birch Society field coordinator for that territory. But if you were to play this Anarchy USA film at a local restaurant and invite people from your community to watch this, the first thing I would recommend doing afterwards is starting your committee. And the committee meets monthly or quarterly. I'd recommend monthly. I mean, if you can meet weekly, that'd be great, but I don't see anybody doing that right now. But a monthly meeting where you have a police officer come in to speak. you have a community leader coming to speak, but you always talk about the John Birch Society perspective of stopping these riots, stopping the communist, strategy within, or socialist strategy within America, whatever you want to call it. I guess the rightful word would be collectivist strategy against America. But we have to be organized, and if there's an organized group of 8 people in a community, the conspirators are done with in that community, because if these 8 people are very influential and are getting to the right people, you've basically stopped the potential riot, rioting people, the people who would organize such a riot, from getting a foothold in the community. And I guess that differs if you're in Atlanta or if you're in Charlotte or if you're in Raleigh, much bigger cities like that. But if we get more and more organized as members of the John Birch Society, we're going to be much better off.
Absolutely. And that of course, brings about visibility that I talked about. Back in the 60s, we had the Truth About Civil Terminal Committees, TACT, the TACT committees. We also had the train committees to focus on the United Nations and what was being done to our military. But TACT committees were very, very popular. Support Your Local Police committees were very, very popular. It's time to bring them back. It's time to get them, do them again.
And I would say in your local community, you could set up a Support Your Local Police committee through a Zoom meeting like this. If you were to hold one, yeah.
And if you mentioned that it should have 8 people and so forth, it can have fewer than that. You can have 4 people. You can have, 4 people's a mob. When you talk about, when you start talking John Birch Society stuff, 4 people is a mob, a good mob.
And there's some members, just them alone's a mob themselves. I mean, they can do a lot of damage against the conspiracy just by one person's work.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's ask some questions, everybody. The Q&A area is there for you to type a question. If you do want to raise your hand, just click on the raise hand button, and I'll do my best to allow you the opportunity to talk. We're going to end this at 12:55, so we have about 27, 28 more minutes left. Kim Fletter has a question. Can we purchase the Anarchy USA or copy the disc for mass distribution? I don't see a problem with copying it. Yeah.
I don't either. Right. Yeah. The answer to that is yes. You don't need a great big heavy projector anymore. You don't need a reel-to-reel film and so on. You've got it on a DVD, or you've got it on a, very, very easily accessible. And of course, you've also got it on the internet.
And there's some people who put their videos on floppy drives or on these USB drives.
Yes.
And then they can hand them out that way. And then you can put multiple videos on the USB drive and just hand them out. These are so cheap. You're hardly at a loss if you hand one of those out.
Very good. That's exactly so.
We do have a new magazine about this topic, and I thought I had it pulled up, but give me a minute here and I should get pulled up so we can review it. It's about the riots that are taking place, and I've read the whole thing. I don't read every magazine, so I'm not one of those. I try to read the cover article and the second article, and then I go for whatever's tempting, whatever looks the best after that. But sometimes every article is tempting, so I just dive in and I read the whole magazine. But I wish I had time to read the whole magazine every time it came out. It does come out twice a month, and members of the John Birch Society, they get this with their membership. And so I'm showing you here our latest special report about what's going on with the police, what the riots, what's really behind the riots. We have some really good advertisers. Without them, we would not be in business. This is a labor of love for so many of us, and we have very good donors that support us. Just so everybody knows, here are some items you can purchase from us to spread the message about supporting local police. Very easy to purchase. And here are the articles that we recently wrote in this. By the way, you can still purchase this magazine from JBS headquarters. You can order 100 of them and get them for, I think, 90 cents a piece. Plus you pay shipping on top of that. we have What's Really Behind the Riots by Alex Newman, Ravaging Black Businesses by Michael Tennant, Jailbreak, Hamstring the Police by William F. Jasper, Disbanding the Police by C. Mitchell Shaw, Nationalizing the Police is Not the Answer by Steve Bias, Supporting Cops by Duke Pesta. I'm just reading you the article titles. On page 34, The Worst Racists in America, and this is by Kurt Williamson. And page 39, The Death of David Dorn. You know, what a tragedy. Most people know about David Dorn. He was killed by, during one of these riots, and he was a retired police officer, I think in St. Louis. And the last article is, This is What Mobocracy Looks Like. And so if you were to purchase this magazine and share it, you can even get the digital version and share it with your friends. And that's how you get people to join the John Birch Society and to get organized. McManus, or Mr. McManus, do you have any final thoughts about what we need to be doing and what maybe is ahead? This is a very different time period. Of course, in the 1960s, we weren't forced to wear masks. And I wasn't around in the 1960s, so you weren't forced to wear a mask in the 1960s.
No.
You weren't told to social distance.
No.
So what do you see coming down the pipeline, and what should we be thinking about? How do we think forward on this? Share with us some wisdom.
Well, what we got to do is we've got to understand that what's going on is another fraud, right? There is a coronavirus, and there are people who died from it. But I think they're using a figure now, 130,000 deaths. I think at least half of them are people who died that had other causes, and they said it was because of COVID-19. There have been situations where doctors and nurses have been forced to change what they put down as the cause of death and make it COVID-19. So it looks like it's worse than it really is. I saw a thing just the other day where some prominent doctor got together with some other people, and he put out, here's how you cure COVID-19. And he suggested very strongly the use of what Donald Trump used for himself. The
hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
Zinc.
Right.
Then
there's another doctor out in West Texas who is using a substance and a thing, converting it to vapor and having people breathe it. And he's had 20 some odd patients who had the coronavirus, and bingo, they were all better within 24 hours. Right? So this doctor listed all these different kinds of ways, and yet you're not allowed to talk about hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
I remember reading about a Black legislator, a woman from Michigan, who was at death's door. And she heard Donald Trump recommend hydroxychloroquine. She begged her doctors to give it to her. They finally did. She recovered. And now she's going to vote for Donald Trump, right? And she's let it be known, but she's also facing resistance among the Black community who are not going to vote for Donald Trump and get rid of her because she's now a Trump fan. When they ask her, how can you possibly be a fan of Donald Trump? And she said, he saved my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. How else better to find somebody to have for a fan, you know? So, all right. Now, this kind of information would stop the drift towards what we see happening and get our country back again.
The questions are coming in.
Questions are coming in. Okay.
Yeah, so Ryan Underwood, since people knew about King in the 1960s, how did he become the idol he is today? Also, how can we break the King cult in our modern culture? Are there any books exposing King you recommend?
About Martin Luther King?
Yeah. Here, I'll just do the first question first. Since people knew about King in the 1960s, how did he become the idol he is today?
Well, he became the idol because not enough people knew. And what happened is a lot of people who were part of the conspiracy against freedom had to expose themselves to support King. And King was, given all kinds of adulation. He was the Time magazine hero. He was this hero. He was that hero, and so on. But he was a liar, and he was a plagiarizer. He was a womanizer, and he worked with the communists. He took money from the communists. He hired the communists. There was one place where he hired a fellow named Jack Odell. Hunter Pitts Odell was his name, a black communist. He hired him in one city to work for him. It got exposed, so he fired him and hired him in another city the next day, and on you go. So that we have Martin Luther King as the hero today is testimony to the fact that, that there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Are there any books, he asked, are there any books you recommend that expose King that could be shared on this topic?
Well, you held up one book that's not in print anymore.
It can easily be purchased though in used bookstores though, online. And I can help anybody purchase this I Testify book if you want it. I've seen it all over the place on the internet. This book is actually another good book. I know I'm promoting your book again, Mr. McManus, but this is a great book to read to learn about what actually happened during the Civil Rights era.
Right, and Julia Brown is pictured in the book, and a little bit of story about what she was able to accomplish. I also have a copy here of a speech that was entered into the congressional record by Congressman Larry McDonald. And it's a speech that Julia Brown gave to a meeting of the John Birch Society held in Washington, D.C. It's the only time we ever had a meeting in Washington, D.C. And its title is Americans Stop Thinking Like Communists, right? Mm-hmm. And she goes into several different areas where Americans are thinking like communists. She knew what communists were thinking. She had for 9 plus years, been a member of the Communist Party for the FBI at great risk to herself. So that's available, and I'll send you a copy of this that you can share with the members down there. You can reprint it and so forth.
I will.
It's not available as a reprint anymore. But Larry McDonald introduced it into the congressional record.
Ron Strange asked, one thing that may be hurting is years ago, JBS had to be listed on security clearance forms. It was listed as subversive. This has been
Where? It wasn't listed as subversive.
This is from Ron. Ron, if you want to type in the chat box where, but this is just what he's saying. So you're saying, Mr. McManus, and I've heard this from people that I know in the military, they have their members and they are open about it, and they still have the full, they know secret stuff that they can't share with me because they have security clearance.
That's right.
And so it's been a myth.
Well, I was public relations director of the John Birch Society from 1973, and I retained that position all the way up into the 21st century. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times I was called upon to discuss the fact that you can't join the military if you were a member of the Birch Society, that the Birch Society was on a list of no-nos you can't be a part of, which is absolutely wrong. Mm-hmm. We had letters from every one of the services, right? The Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, and so on, all letters from high officials in these military branches saying there's absolutely no reason why a member of the military cannot be a member of the John Birch Society. Yeah. So it was never the case. And yet there are people who still think that that's the case today. I had one guy insist, he says, I saw it on a list that was shared with me and my fellow soldiers at base so-and-so somewhere in America. I said, well, was it produced locally? He said, I don't know how it was produced. I said, well, what happened is you probably had some ambitious young lieutenant or captain or something put together a list, and he added the Birch Society to the names, and he shouldn't have done it because that was a lie. It was not, we were never branded as a subversive by any branch of the United States government.
Palmer Bayless said, feel free to paraphrase this. I I probably should have thought more about this. He says there, I recognize education is the most important variable in teaching others. Unfortunately, most people under 25 years old can barely concentrate longer than 90 seconds. And you know this, Mr. McManus. He says, for example, very few people will read an entire book or an article. Are there any JBS materials with distilled, bite-sized information that may help further conversations?
I think this is good. And Julia Brown even gets into the fact of the communists wanting to start the Department of Education. And the first head of the Department of Education was a humanist who is an ally of the communist movement, right? So, yeah.
I'm going to share everybody real quick our videos on this that I think can help, because I'm a millennial, so I can understand millennials, you know, fairly well. Although I do read books, most millennials don't. But this video we have right here is a 4-minute long video. It's found on our website, and you should be able to hear it.
There is a growing controversy regarding law enforcement in America. With every crisis, whether it is a bombing or a riot, there seems to be a growing movement that shifts the control of our local police departments to the federal government. Actually, this controversy dates all the way back.
Okay, I'm not going to share the whole thing, but this is from our playlist here for Support Your Local Police. And this is titled Local Police First National Police. And we have more of these that are available to watch. But I think that's the best one we have for millennials. So for the person that asked that question, Palmer, I would go grab that video. And if you have people in your network that have short attention spans, try to use that on them and see if it works. Go ahead, Mr. McManus.
I know people who got interested in the John Birch Society and were not themselves good readers and so forth, and became exactly that. They became readers. They started to read the books, the pamphlets, the magazines, and so forth. I have in mind what I call my blue-collar PhDs, right? These are people who really got an education from the John Birch Society and are very, very happy and pleased.
I like that. I'm going to use that name, blue-collar PhDs. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
We got a question from Andy. I'm going to allow him to talk. Andy Wyndham, go ahead and ask your question.
I just wanted to, say I've had the same experience that Mr. McManus has, okay? I've had people at my table that swore, these were people that was in the military, okay? They swore that they seen the John Birch Society on this subversive list, okay? And no matter what argument I had, okay, I often tell them that I had a top security clearance. I did not see it, okay? But the fact of the matter is, I just wanted to agree with Mr. McManus that rumor is still around.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. When people find out that there's no truth to that rumor, then they should be a prime prospect for further information from the John Birch Society and maybe eventually membership. So it can help us in that regard. I know of people that have been turned around when they were shown that in fact there was no listing of the John Birch Society on any subversive list, and it got them to thinking to themselves, what else have I been told that is totally false? Well, there's an awful lot of falsehood going around, and we all know that in the John Birch Society, so we can correct that one, then we can correct another one and so forth, and then we get some people involved in what we're trying to do.
We're not done yet, but I am going to encourage everybody. Am I interrupting you, Mr. McManus?
Okay.
Please, if you want this book and if you want an autograph, send $20, check or cash, written to John F. McManus to P.O. Box 3076, Wakefield, Massachusetts 01880. I'm going to say that again. Write it to John F. McManus, P.O. Box 3076, Wakefield, Massachusetts 01880. That, and I put that in the chat box earlier on too, so you can get that from there. But $20 includes shipping, and it also gets you the book autographed. So there's plenty of value in doing that and studying the history of the John Birch Society, because there's a lot of people out there who are skeptical, and we have to be the ones that educate them on why it's okay to join, why we're the good one. We're the good organization. We are the American organization that takes on the hardest battles, and we have the right strategy to win this. So anyways, I wanted to say that real quick. Ron said here, he said my clearance was from the 1960, and he says it did have JBS listed, but in the 80s and 90s, it was not there.
Oh,
He said the later clearance included TSQ.
no. The John Birch Society was never on any of the lists. We have letters from high officials in the Pentagon, all the different branches saying, no, the John Birch Society has never been declared a subversive organization. Any member of the military is free to join.
Boyd Parks, he asked, a friend in Ackworth came from Cuba around 1960, and at some point he was asked if he was a member of the Communist Party of the John Birch Society.
That can't happen.
Linda Everett has a question. Didn't the House Committee on Un-American Activities clear the JBS?
We asked them to. Robert Welch went to the federal officials. He went to the Senate's Internal Security Subcommittee. He went to the House Committee on American Activities by letter, begging for an investigation of the John Birch Society. The only investigation that was ever conducted was done by a California state organization. And that one, after 2 years of investigating, sending people in secretly to join the Birch Society to find out what really goes on in those meetings and so forth, all kinds of reasons, they put out a complete whitewash of the John Birch Society and said it just isn't true what has been said about the society.
And I'm trying to find it here, but I know in your book you talk about that. So that's something that's mentioned in California. Right. They sent people in that were incognito. You didn't know that they worked for the government, and they came out afterwards saying that there was nothing wrong with the John Birch Society.
Some of those people who were sent by that committee to join the Birch Society found out all about the Birch Society, came back and reported it to their bosses, and then stayed on as a member. That was a real victory on our part.
That's incredible. Wow. I didn't know that. That's
an interesting sidelight, right? There are lots of that kind of thing in the Birch Society. It's been tar brushed, but during the height of attacks on the John Birch Society was the period when we grew the most. Mm-hmm. We were getting visibility. It was being handed to us, and it wasn't nice what they said about us. I know people who joined the Birch Society fearing that they had to do something to keep this from happening in their community, right? Yeah. And they stayed on as members when they found out the truth.
Well, we want to be investigated. Everybody, if they don't think that we're a good group, we welcome the investigation. Show up to our meetings, show up to meet with the field coordinators and learn more about us. There's just a few minutes left here. I encourage everybody to get involved if you haven't yet. Please, I don't want to be the one doing these webinars, every week. If you're a member, you can invite Mr. McManus to be your guest. We are going through a phase right now where we are getting so many members. A field coordinator like me has trouble juggling everything.
Good.
Which is a good thing, because it wasn't always like that.
Well, we want to get you off your comfortable chair there. We want you to get out in the field and go meet people and so forth. Be visible.
Yeah. Yes. And I know you do. I want more people to learn how to do these events. I will help you. And if you haven't joined the John Birch Society yet, I will help you do these. You can use Mr. McManus as your first guest. And that's how you can educate your closest friends right away without ever showing up to a meeting. They can just log in through their computer. And I think there's probably a couple people that are on their phones, logging in and maybe they're just listening to this. But it's just incredible with the technology, how quickly we can educate people. So I do encourage you to do that. Mr. McManus, do you have any final words before we end this?
Well, if we continue to go downhill, which the country obviously is going downhill, it's going to get to a point where there's no way to get out of the hole, right? I don't believe that's going to happen, but I do know that if it does get cast aside and we get our country back, it's because of the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society has the answer. What's going on in Afghanistan? What's going on in Turkey? What's going on here and what's going on there? What's going on in Portland, Oregon and Louisville, Kentucky and someplace in Texas or whatever. We have the answer, and what we need is more people to understand it and to want to do something about it. Ultimately, those people will elect for themselves a decent member of the House of Representatives, a good senator, and so forth. And we get our government back to being a servant and not a master. And that's what we're looking for. We're fortunate to be Americans because we live in the greatest country that was ever put together. The only one that started off by saying men are endowed by their creator with rights. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted. In other words, the government is subordinate to the God Almighty who gave us the rights in the first place. And the government wants to take over the rights. It wants to make slaves out of all of us, right? So that that they can run. That's the conspiracy that we talk about. It's been going on throughout history. Very obvious today. We got to stop it. We can stop it. We stop it, and the way to stop it is through the efforts of the John Birch Society. If you're not a member listening to the program, I encourage you to join. If you are a member, I encourage you to get busier than you have been, and reach out to more people, because there's a lot of people today who are disturbed and want to know what to do.
And everybody, if you like drinking coffee or tea, get your support your local police mug from Shop JBS. Even if you just drink water, these are great, and it shows people where you stand. This has been recorded, and it will be available on my personal YouTube channel. My name's Evan Mulch, spelled EVANMULCH. I have a playlist of all of our past Birchinars, and then you can find it on the Bircher podcast, BIRCHER podcast on iTunes, or you can just go to bircher.podomatic.com. Thanks again, Mr. McManus. We'll do this hopefully again soon. I encourage all you to join and to start doing these on your own, and to get as active as possible right now, because I want to see freedom for the rest of my life, my son's life. I want to live this lifestyle I've lived, and I do not want to go down the path of Marxism any further than we've already gone in America. So anyways, please, from the depth of my heart, take action, help the John Birch Society out, because it's up to us to save our country. Thanks again, Mr. McManus, and bye-bye, everybody.
Let me say goodbye from Massachusetts, which has just changed its name. We are now Massachusetts.
Oh, man.
Thank you, Evan,
Yeah.
for the chance to talk to your South Carolinians. And yes, let's do it again. God bless everybody. Keep America strong.